The following program deals with a controversial subject. The theories expressed are not the only possible interpretation. Viewers are invited to make a judgment based on all available information.
This is your captain speaking. We are beginning our descent into madness.
Open your mind.
And we are back to another edition of West of the Rockies. I'm Frank. Thank you guys for sticking around. I know it's late for some of you, and but I'm pretty sure we're gonna make it worth your while. Genevieve, how you doing over there?
I'm doing all right, thank you.
Doing okay?
Yeah, excited. I'm tired, but definitely excited.
Yeah, I think we're both excited, and it's an interesting day here in LA because we've gotten quite a lot of rain.
I think that's an understatement. Honestly,
Like
this is not why I moved here. I'm like, oh, California, it's the state of sun and oranges and what?
Yeah, we're going to get into all the conspiracy here in just a minute because tonight we have a really special guest. If you're a fan of Back to the Future, you might have heard their name before. It's Marty McFly.
This is the actual Marty McFly.
Yeah. No, but we have a guest, and we're going to find out why we're calling him Marty McFly. Why don't we check and hopefully, fingers crossed, our connection is working. And by the way, if anybody has questions, feel free to post in the chat room. Tweet us at WoTR Radio on Twitter or Facebook, facebook.com/West of the Rockies. And we will be happy to pass your question along to tonight's guest. Marty, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you just perfectly. And I believe you're located in Hill Valley, correct?
That's correct. I'm broadcasting live tonight from the Hill Valley Auditorium. Everybody's on their best behavior around here.
That is very good. How's the
It's a small but dedicated crowd.
Was that Doc Brown I heard in the background clapping?
That's it.
All right, cool. I will stop with all these bad Back to the Future jokes. Now, Marty, thank you for being with us tonight. I know that we're having a few laughs, but some of the stuff that we're going to talk about tonight might be a bit serious. But I think people will find it interesting nonetheless. But first of all, obviously, it's not every day that we get somebody on the show using an alias. Marty McFly, why are you going by that name?
Well, I guess it's the subject matter, Frank. We're talking about something called Project Blue Book as an investigation of UFOs. Mm-hmm. And I guess the point I want to make is that the name Marty McFly is just as real as the investigation of UFOs.
So it's real because Marty existed, right? Like my childhood is not a lie.
Just as real as the Project Blue Book investigation of UFOs.
Wow. Obviously, the implication here is that the whole Project Blue Book was nothing more than smoke and mirrors, so to speak. Why don't you tell me a little bit of what was the purpose of Project Blue Book?
Well, I'm kind of a student of history here, and okay. I got into this a few weeks ago because I've always been really interested in the phenomena in the skies, whatever you want to call it. And I saw this article on CNN that the Project Blue Book files were now online. Mm-hmm. And being a big fan of aerial phenomena, couldn't resist and started looking into it. And it's a great slice of history. It's not just the files that are there or were there for a week online. It's a lot of what were once top secret documents that have been declassified and are now available in a lot of different places. And they're a great slice of history that show human beings for who they really are. Not as good people or bad people, but people in a difficult situation making out as best they could.
Wow. And you said that, these documents were declassified and they were online, and it seems that they were taken down. Do you know the reason why the documents were removed from public viewing on the internet?
Well, I saw an explanation for it, but I'm not sure what the real explanation was. They were up for a week, and they're not there anymore. There are a number of I like to avoid the term UFO because it's a fabricated term. But there are similar reports available at other government websites like the FBI's Vault. The Central Intelligence Agency has some files on UFOs. And, so the NICAP, National Investigative Committee on Aerial Phenomena, has files on them. You can find them in any number of places.
And I know that, when we first started talking, you were telling me some of the concerns as far as, going through these documents and I guess some of the flags, if you will, that it could raise. Can you tell me a little bit about what are some of the security concerns that you feel surround this research that you've done?
Well, any research that concerns a project that was once classified, I think, is something to take seriously. Because even though a project may be declassified, the agenda of that project may still exist under another project name. So I think we always have to be careful about what we do, and name calling and making fun of people who were really maybe just doing the best they can.
Who was behind Project Blue Book? Was it military, the CIA, another branch of the government? Who were the people that were putting all this together?
It started out as an Air Force project that was sponsored by the agency.
And by the agency, you mean the CIA?
Yeah. And it started out under the name Project Grudge.
Wow.
And if ever there was anything in a name, that was it.
Why?
And you can imagine, if you had a research project named Grudge, it would probably reveal something about that research not really being serious research.
Could I just butt in here? And you're talking about how this information was taken off the internet. Why would they put it on there in the first place in that case? What would their motivation be, or what could they get out of that?
Everything that is available online today was the result of FOIA requests, and that's Freedom of Information Act requests, pounded at by many people, many organizations over time. And I think that the agencies have put them there because they no longer consider them to be sensitive, or the information inside of those documents.
That's I think Skype has a new
apparently
advertising scheme.
Skype has now video advertising.
during a call. Wow.
Were you asking? Okay, Genevieve.
No, I was.
Yeah.
I just asked that question, but no,
back to your question of why they would put these documents there. Many of the documents are pretty heavily redacted. They're blacked out.
Yeah.
It's been decades since these projects were in existence. So
now you're talking about these documents and saying how they give a very interesting view of this particular time in history.
Sure.
What can you tell me about that? What did you uncover looking through these documents?
Well, I guess first we kind of have to go back in history to look at the context where these documents came about and these programs came about.
Okay.
This was the end of, or the post-World War II era. There was a lot of activity around WMD development, nuclear type stuff, other stuff too. And Project Blue Book was developed during a time where the United States was intently interested in not only its own nuclear program, but other nuclear programs. And also, to give you a background, at the end of World War II, there was an operation called Paperclip. Does that ring any bells?
Yeah, of course.
It was the roundup of 1,600 German scientists and their families, and transporting them to the United States, where they were tended by their new taskmasters, the people at the agency. And of course, that brought a whole lot of problems with it, because we knew for certainty that there would be Soviet agents among them.
Wow.
And even then, we knew that this group of scientists would be a magnet for Soviet spies in the United States.
Wow.
We had a host of projects, including Blue Book and its predecessor, which I'll call Grudge, just it's a shorter word. Another one was called, you might have heard of this, MK Ultra.
Oh, of course, yes.
Right, and its predecessor, Bluebird. It's funny, they do these rebranding names, and you have to give the agency credit because maybe it's like, some kind of graveyard humor during this very serious time. Mm-hmm. They would have these really, really clever names like, Blue Book is something that you might get from a used car salesman, and Bluebird, for MK Ultra and the experiments they were doing, basically dosing people with all kinds of horrific chemical agents, including LSD and scopolamine and methadone and barbiturates and heroin, and I don't know that it was really mind control mm-hmm. as much as it was a way to get inside these little scientific minds and control them through potentially embarrassing episodes to threaten their security clearances.
Wow. And by I kind of have an idea, but I just want to hear your opinion. By embarrassing episodes, what is that in reference to? What would be an example of an embarrassing episode?
Well, put on your imagination cap mm-hmm. for a minute. Okay, you're a German scientist inside the United States. Mm-hmm. You've been given a false identity, and you have family maybe,
right?
And you certainly have a job, and you're clinging to that job,
right?
And that job all depends on your security clearance. Mm-hmm. Without that security clearance, you're going to be out of a job, and you're probably going to be going back to Germany and facing some very unpleasant proceedings.
One of at least one of the more prominent German scientists that was brought over, during Project Paperclip was Werner von Braun.
Correct.
Now, this, to me, it sounds like it backs up the idea or the theories that a lot of people had that Germany was working on some type of space program. They were developing some kind of advanced spacecraft because Werner von Braun was one of the main scientists that was working on these rockets, and lo and behold, all these scientists are transplanted to the U.S., and then we have NASA and et cetera, et cetera. Is that something that you found as you went through these documents?
After Operation Paperclip came into being, and we only know about this recently, the trail kind of goes cold mm-hmm. because these scientists were all given fake identities.
Okay.
And the only thing that we know is that people like Hubertus Strughold, one of the scientists of some renown because he had a building named after him, mm-hmm. Wound up in some war crimes proceedings for human experiments at Dachau.
Wow.
And he was actually in 3 different investigations, was never completely exonerated because he died during the last investigation.
Wow.
So that gives you an idea. These were not exactly Boy Scouts here.
Right. And it seems like that the government did have some leverage to, in a way, kind of twist their arm a little bit into working for the U.S. and not letting them stray too far. Hence why I guess
it's a pretty good deal for both sides. It's either be killed or work for us in a way.
The expression was hire them or hang them.
Yeah.
Let's hire them.
Yeah.
Also, imagine this. It's not just a matter of cracking the whip on these people. Mm-hmm. What the big prize for us would be able to find one of these either sources or agents among the German scientists working for the Soviet Union and turn them so that we would have eyes and ears inside the Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah, because some of the scientists ended up going with the Soviets.
Here's the thing, and we'll sort of do a little bit of a fast forward from Paperclip mm-hmm. to the early nuclear experiments. Mm-hmm. There's some evidence to suggest that the Germans had the first successful nuclear test in March of 1945.
Wow.
There was at least one witness who reported something. It was bright flash, as bright as the sun, and generating a wind. And this is in Thuringia, which is in central Germany, in March of 45. Also, in May of 45, we intercepted a U-boat that was loaded with 1,200 pounds of enriched uranium.
Wow.
And plans for the EME-262, the German Messerschmitt jet fighter, plans for V2s, formulas for sarin gas, and recipes for biological agents. It was headed for Japan. I don't imagine it was on a peaceful mission to Japan, but so these were the stakes with German technology at the end of World War II. Now, we asked about the Russians and their sophistication in the space program. The Russians were hot on the Soviets, I have to say, were hot on our tail, technologically speaking.
Right.
We launched our first successful nuclear test in July of 1945. The Russians launched their first nuclear test in 1949, only 4 years behind us.
Wow.
Then, in 1952, we had the first successful thermonuclear test over some atoll in the South Pacific that I'm sure doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
And it was 450 times bigger than the bomb that we dropped on Hiroshima. So, I mean, that is a railroad train full of boxcars stuffed with TNT from San Francisco to Denver. That's how much explosive power that was. Wow. And the Russians detonated their first thermonuclear device, their first hydrogen bomb, 6 months after that in 1953. So that's how close the Soviets were to us in our technology, and that's, I think, why a lot of these projects and programs came about.
That is really fascinating to see how. Yeah, I mean, it was a really tight race, and I think that kind of sets up the stage for, like you said, these projects and their names and what was the purpose of these projects. And real quick, you mentioned that these documents were released through Freedom of Information Act requests. To your knowledge and from the research you've done, do all these documents check out?
Yes, and I've confirmed these documents with the sponsoring agencies, and they all absolutely check out. They're either from the government agencies themselves or contractors who worked for the government. Like, one of them is from the RAND Corporation, one of them is from the University of Colorado. Both of them were under contract to the federal government at the time. And everybody has fessed up to the authenticity of these documents.
And obviously, this is a lot of work for one individual to undertake. Were you asked to do this by anyone?
No, this is a completely voluntary. I'm kind of a history buff, like I said.
And
so specifically in regards to this, what first triggered you to decide to want to explore this on your own?
Well, gosh, it's like James Bond meets E.T. at Stalag 13. I mean, how much better does it get?
Okay, so just outright genuine interest.
Outright genuine interest.
Okay.
Sure.
And before we get into the topic of UFOs and all this, are you a believer in UFOs yourself?
I'm an agnostic.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the best research is going to be done by people who don't go into the project with a belief one way or the other. I think that I'm less of an agnostic now than I was a couple of months ago, having looked at these documents and seeing what they mean. And there's a lot of surprise in there, and there was for me anyway. Mm-hmm. So I'd say much less of an agnostic, but still an agnostic right now.
Now, you mentioned that the word UFO was a fabrication.
Yes.
Prior to that, what were some of the terms used to refer to these unidentified flying craft?
Well, in World War II, they were simply referred to as Foo Fighters. Mm-hmm. They've been called everything under the sun, religious apparitions. Some forms have been called green fireballs. Flying saucer was coined by a guy named Kenneth Arnold, who was flying a plane, looking on a I think it was a plane rescue effort over Mount Rainier, when he saw this formation of things, saucer-shaped things, flying along at about 1,000 miles an hour, which was twice anything we could do at the time. And he said it looked like they were saucers skipping across a pond. So that's where the term flying saucer came from. So, a lot of different names before UFO, and it's not UFO, it's pronounced UFO, was coined by Project Grudge under the sponsorship of the agency.
I think right now, obviously, like I said, we've set the stage. We kind of know more or less what was the environment at the time, the political environment of the late 40s into the 50s. Now we have this Project Blue Book, and the point of the project was to investigate these sightings that Army personnel and civilians all across the country were having. If that was not the real purpose, what was the point of keeping this project alive for however many years and logging all this information?
Well, that's the $30 million question at this point. If you look at one of these documents, it's the Project Grudge documents. If you look at the stated purposes of that, the finding was predetermined. What Project Grudge was saying is that as far as the media is concerned, certainly anybody who files a report on these objects is either stupid or lying or crazy.
True.
And all of those are not going to help your security clearance. And furthermore, they said we're going to announce that to the press.
Wow.
And there was another kind of a footnote that wasn't to be released to the press, and that is that this could be used as psychological warfare. And I believe that it certainly could have been used as psychological warfare on the German scientists that we had here.
Wow.
And any Soviet agents that were trying to recruit the German scientists or get information from them.
That's some pretty insane stuff. I mean, it's almost like a really the stuff you see in movies with like agents and double agents. I can understand the need for secrecy. However, I've always felt that the government was very cynical. Like you said, they tried to discredit the witnesses, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
However, they were still giving it quite a lot of attention to this whole UFO thing. Now, obviously, we have Project Blue Book. We have all these sightings. We have, the German scientists and the Russians hot on our tail as far as the famous space race. Why don't you tell me if you found anything in the documents regarding the need to get to space? Was that something that was discussed in any of these documents? Because obviously, once we got the Apollo missions, et cetera, a lot of people claim that there were UFO sightings that the astronauts were not in the liberty to discuss.
Any pilot would tell you, reporting and I'm going to call them here on out UAPs because it's a better term. UFO is because it's a design term. It's designed to be too narrow, and it has a bias built into it.
Yeah.
We're sort of preconditioned to reject it. Like when you use the term in polite company or in public, you'll see a lot of raised eyebrows and snickers and giggles and stuff like that. So right. I like to use the term UAP.
Okay.
It stands for unidentified aerial phenomena. It's a much broader term, and it's doesn't evoke the little green men and the aluminum foil caps and
right.
all. So back to your question.
So we have, these reports of astronauts that claim to have seen UFOs, et cetera, et cetera. Was there any mention of UFO sightings in the space program in these documents at all?
There was for a while, a very short period of time.
And
the first high altitude flight, and I think that it was an X1 or an X2. Mm-hmm. I think it was a guy named Walker. I actually have that report in my files before the site disappeared. Mm-hmm. I downloaded that one, and there was a report of a UAP. This is a great one. This guy had broken through like the stratosphere, the ionosphere. He was like way the frig up there, wow. Way up there, and traveling at supersonic speeds. I don't know, like Mach 4 or 5
Wow.
or something crazy like that. And he looked out his window, and here's this thing about, he said it was about the size of a pack of cigarettes, keeping up with him,
Really?
and finally passed him. Now, I didn't, when I read this, and the report included newspaper clippings because he talked to the press. And I said, well, I've never heard of this Walker guy. Well, you didn't really hear too much about him after that because he broke one of the taboos. He started talking about something he shouldn't have been talking about.
Oh, wow.
And as we would find out in many of his reports, and it was even reported in an Air Force textbook that was printed in 1968 and then discontinued in 1970, that pilots were punished for talking about the UAPs.
Wow.
Punished.
Right.
So, even though it apparently happened, we didn't hear about it. And there's a reason. There are two reasons we didn't hear about it. Number one, the pilots and the astronauts tended not to talk about them because they were career killers. Number two, we had another program in place called Operation Mockingbird. Have you heard about that one?
Yeah, that name rings a bell.
Everybody in the press ought to be aware of Operation Mockingbird. It was brought forth by the agency during a time, particularly after this, the Soviets detonated their first hydrogen bomb, as a way to control media. And the agency basically controlled 25 U.S. newspapers, a television network, a wire service, a couple of influential magazines, and these all had the status of being sources that were quoted.
Right.
So by controlling the media and being able to strip any accounts, any UFO accounts, or play them down, or play the people up that talked about them as either stupid or lying or crazy, really kind of tamped down any reports of these UAPs. It's hard for me to imagine that the UAPs simply stopped.
Right.
It's more likely that we didn't hear about them because they either weren't reported, or if they were reported, they didn't make it into the media, because the agency, for I think a pretty good reason, was short-stopping these reports.
Wow.
Could I just check again? Did you anticipate the documents being taken off quite soon after being putting online, or are there any documents you didn't get to download in time, or did you just download them all? I mean, how did you do
No,
that?
there are, I don't know. I didn't really count them. When I first found them, I was shocked that they were there. And that's why and any researcher will tell you, get what you can while you can.
Yeah.
I didn't get every single document there. I got a few of the choice ones. I was still surprised that the site went down as soon as it did. But I got what I could.
It sounds like Operation Mockingbird is still alive and well, if you ask me.
And
well, back to the point. I think that it was done for pretty good reasons with pretty good results, because there's a term inside the intelligence community that it's called the sausage factory, and that's that everybody wants a sausage, but nobody wants a factory. The fact is that the intelligence business is a pretty ugly business, but we did make it through this very difficult time with our skins.
We have a question in the chat room from Professor Madness. He asks if you've ever gotten any papers using the Freedom of Information Act that have not been blacked out. I know that a lot of documents are, censored for the most part. Yeah, it's like you see a lot of the the big black marker.
The place that I found, I tell you what, I don't want to answer that for one reason. There was a place that I found that wasn't actually a FOIA. It was an original source, and it was I don't want to say it because I don't want to compromise it. But if you look among the government agencies, there are a lot of documents that they missed. There are a lot of documents that aren't completely redacted that still have the names in them. I was surprised when I found, and it wasn't really among the documents that disappeared. It was another stack of documents that are still there. How many witness names there were existing still on the documents?
Right.
So I don't want to say, because, it would make it easy for somebody to go through and say, oh my gosh, we missed something.
Right.
Right. So I don't want to say. I'm sorry.
Understandable.
There is actually another question from the same listener, but you don't have to answer that straight away. The question is, what's the biggest discovery you feel that you've made? So that's quite an open question, so feel free to answer that.
Give me a couple minutes with that.
Okay,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
I guess any researcher, what you look for is something I would call structure.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to go through a stack of documents or files from different agencies, and what you're going to look for, usually, if there's no controversy, if everything's pretty straight, then there's no real structure. Everything's pretty flat and everything's pretty consistent.
Yeah.
It's like a prairie, right? What surprised me here was the structure. It was like friggin' Half Dome, or El Capitan, rising up and then dropping down to the Grand Canyon. The one that really surprised me was the Grudge documents as compared to the policy documents before Grudge and after Grudge.
What was the surprising aspect of the Grudge documents?
Well, before Grudge, and this is a policy, or I should say it was an analysis by the Office of Naval Intelligence regarding UAP, that number one, they existed, and number two, that we shouldn't ignore them. Mm-hmm. That was in 1948.
Yeah. No, I was very surprised by how clearly written the document was, and that it wasn't what you would expect, which is often a document full of jargon, things you don't really understand, and I liked how they approached it very clearly.
Yes. And that, in a way, that surprised me, because it ran contrary to what I understood the government's position to be.
Yeah.
So then I compare that to the NSA monograph in 1968 that agreed with the ONI analysis 20 years earlier that said, it's real and we can't ignore it. And then the RAND analysis, the same year, it's real and we can't ignore it. Mm-hmm. And then you get to the Grudge document that the Grudge policy that stood for 16 years and probably more, that we can just ignore this stuff. Yeah. And we should.
Where did that come from? Yeah.
No, I really like the in the NSA analysis, which is, whether it's national security or central intelligence, they're all the agency, right? And it was interesting that 20 years after the fact, that these people came up with the rattlesnake analogy, that you're walking down a forest path and somebody ahead of you yells rattlesnake. You don't close your eyes and keep walking.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You have to do something about it.
Right, and that's where the Grudge documents really stood out to me. Back to the question, what stood out to you, and where did this all begin? So, back to the structure. That's where the structure was. Yeah. So at first it seems like, well, somebody made a mistake, or Uncle Sam is stupid, or the Central Intelligence Agency is dumb, or one of those things. But it doesn't last for long. It starts nagging at you. It keeps you awake at night.
Yeah.
And you're wondering what is really going on here, and that's where you start looking.
Okay. No, it's really interesting, and I hadn't read all of the later documents, but yeah, no, I mean, it makes you want to know why the sudden change, but you don't just turn around and ignore something. Yeah.
Certainly.
Now in the documents, we obviously read about UFO sightings, and there is an account of I believe it was a World War II veteran pilot who engaged in a dogfight for over 20, what was it, like 27 minutes. It's really interesting. I've read in websites and blogs everything from the Red Baron shot down a UFO to obviously these pilots were seeing things, and there is another document later on where they're trying to explain where these craft come from. Could they possibly come from another planet? They even hypothesized the possibility that they could be from Mars or being one of the few planets in the solar system that could possibly harbor any life. Did you find any more references to where they think these craft could be coming from if they were indeed extraterrestrial?
In some of the earlier analyses, there was a predecessor to Grudge called Sign, Project Sign.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to me that there was some discussion in there about possible planetary origin, whether it was, Martian or Jovian, from Jupiter,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe Venus. I just thought that this was quite remarkable. It went from do these things exist to, well, where could these things come from? That was really the only thing I ever picked up, and it wasn't really. There was no evidence or no reports or any specific information given. It was just theory about where these things could possibly come from, and what the distances would be, what the times would be. What we're looking at here is, what kind of threat could these things pose to our national security? Could they be here lickety split, or would they have to plan something years in advance? That's all I found.
It seems, I don't know how far it was explored further down the line, but the first possibility or probability was that if it was an alien, and I mean alien as in not from this country, the number one suspect was always the Soviets. I mean, they were the main ones if it were to have come from
like a man-made
another country, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know how far that was, like I said, explored further down the line, but that's what I read in the first.
That was, I think, one of the first major concerns.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a Soviet technology or a Chinese technology? Something we're going to get surprised with, and that was pretty well explained in the 1968 Air Force textbook, that these sightings have been going on for 50,000 years.
Yeah.
So, whatever it is has been around here for a while, and it's nothing particularly new.
Mm-hmm.
And, I like to, refer to the dog and car analogy. You've probably seen dogs chase cars, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen one catch a car?
No, I'd like to.
And what would a dog do if it caught a car?
They wouldn't know what to do with it.
Well, that's precisely it, and I think that's where there was a report by it's called the Condon Report. University of Colorado did a report that was pretty much in lockstep with what the Air Force wanted them wanted the finding to be.
Mm-hmm.
But their finding was that these UAP are not a threat to our national security, at least at this time. And I kind of have to agree with that finding, because there's a lot of evidence that we have fired on these UAPs many, many, many times, and they've never fired back. In fact, I think that we could be well regarded with bemusement as the dog in this case by these passing cars. And what would be the point in messing up your bumper, on one of these mongrels type thing? So to think that they could be a Soviet thing, I think was probably a primary concern, but they're so technologically far in advance. If the UAP is of some foreign or extraterrestrial or superpower, they're so far ahead of us, we'd just be barking at the car.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you'd think that people, the government, whoever is involved with this, would realize that it's, I don't know, very naive to just start shooting or attempting to attack something like that, which is very possibly, probably out of their league,
Did you get a chance to read the I guess you'd call it the gunfight at the OK Corral in Kentucky? There was a family of 11.
Oh, yes.
No, I didn't.
Where E.T. paid this these nice Kentucky family a visit one evening, and the family unloaded with everything they had, shotguns and pistols, and I think the bullets were bouncing off of these creatures, and the creatures seemed just tickled by it. And the family of 11 were so frightened at the end of that episode. I mean, the creature, whatever it was, walked away unharmed. They had unloaded. There were 50 shotgun and pistol shells left there behind, and they were so freaked out that they moved away from their farm.
Wow.
I think I would.
No, that was such an amazing. Yeah, I remember reading that, and that
was in the Air Force textbook that got removed. Yeah.
But I don't know. I just feel someone that's people that are apparently taking care of an entire nation. I feel that they should have more foresight and think about what they're doing more rather than just delving into the depths that they don't really know about.
Well, you see these in the papers here, these paradoxes between the military commanders, particularly, and the policy of the administration and the agency not to talk about the UAP, where the military wanted to talk about the UAP. In fact, the first 4 directors of the agency were all military. I call them the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, because they were there from 1946 until 1952, and they try as they might, couldn't really, they were constantly surprised by the Soviets, so they got replaced by a lawyer. Alan Dulles was the first non-military director. He was a lawyer.
Okay.
One of these guys, his name was Roscoe Hillenkotter, I believe. He was an admiral. After he left as the agency director, he became a member of the board of directors at NICAP, which is an independent investigative agency, and they have a pretty good website right now, NICAP, NICAP.org. There's a lot of good information there. And here was a guy who, publicly was kind of strapped to this policy of not talking about UAP. But privately, in his later life, he became active in discussing UAP. So 2 schools of thought on this, depending, whether you're part of the agency culture or you're part of the military culture.
Now we're going to be taking a break shortly, and we got a few more questions that we want to ask you. But before we do that, I want to pass along another question by Professor Madness. He wants to know, what is the biggest government cover-up in your opinion? Well,
I think that it wasn't really a cover-up. I think that as I look at this ensemble of policies and information, that it looks to be that it was more of a counterintelligence operation than an investigative operation. So I wouldn't really call it a cover-up, because counterintelligence or intelligence by its very nature is deceptive. So I couldn't call it a government cover-up. So I can't say that I saw any evidence of a government cover-up, but I do see some signs of something that could have been a fairly successful counterintelligence operation.
Wow. Okay. And I know that, one of the questions that I want to ask you, and we'll tackle that on the other side of the break, is your personal beliefs in extraterrestrial life. And we want to talk more about that and some other stuff that, this is obviously, as you can tell, a very fascinating topic for me. I ever since I was a kid, I was into this whole UFO thing, thanks to my dad, actually, because he used to buy the books. And I remember reading a lot of these books with stories from former military personnel. They had, come forward to, share their experiences. Of course, we had, Betty and Barney Hill, the famous abduction case that happened during that time.
Right.
As you were talking about how the agency was going to these great lengths to discredit somebody, it reminded me of Betty and Barney Hill, and how a lot of, well, I shouldn't say a lot of people, but, one of the main ideas that they were pushing to discredit them was that, oh, they were just an interracial couple dealing with, the trauma of being one of the first interracial couples during, such a segregated, time in our country's history. And, it's really funny to see how these tactics like our Operation Mockingbird and just how they try to control and manipulate the public's perception of this phenomena and the people they have experienced it. It really boggles my mind. And I know I said it in a bit of a tongue-in-cheek kind of way, but I do feel like Operation Mockingbird is still in effect when I see the news and listen to the news and read the newspapers, et cetera, et cetera. I still believe that information is controlled heavily in the way that is presented to the public.
I'd have to chime in with the 1968 NSA monograph. Keep your eyes open and watch your step.
Wow. And we'll definitely be doing that. So, Marty, if you got a couple of minutes, would you mind just hanging on the line? We're gonna just play a song or two, and then we're gonna jump back into this topic.
Standing by.
So enjoy the tunes. We're gonna be right back. West of the Rockies on the Independent FM. Thank you guys for tuning in. Don't stray too far from your computer. We're gonna be right back.
West of the Rockies with Frank.
What's up, guys? This is Jorge Diaz of Paranormal Activity, The Marked Ones, and you're listening to West of the Rockies with Frank. This portion of the show is sponsored by Haunted Orange County, your premier source for all things haunted in and around OC. From haunted history ghost walks to ghost group hunting expeditions at some of SoCal's most haunted destinations. Make your fall plans early and book an upcoming tour or investigation today. Visit hauntedoc.com.
West of the Rockies. I'm Frank. Thank you guys for sticking around. I know it's late. I want to thank everybody for the tweets and the retweets and the messages and the questions and all that good stuff. It's always appreciated, guys. We're happy that you enjoy our little program here on the Independent FM, broadcasting through iHeartRadio and all that other good stuff. As always, Engineer Frank on Twitter, West of the Rockies on Facebook, our good buddy Jimmy Jaime Roque on Twitter, Genevieve Uwe on Twitter. Also catch her on No Added Flavors Thursday nights right here on this same station.
Yep. Google
accepting
it,
requests
it,
and all that good stuff.
Twitter it.
Now let me bring Marty back on the line real quick. Marty, this is the time when we all give out our social media, et cetera, but I understand that you wish to remain anonymous.
So throw out your address to everyone right now.
Marty McFly at hillvalley.com.
There we go. Now, I saw a question in the chat room. I think somebody was asking who was that I just played. I don't know if that was the question, but I'll be happy to tell people that was Jim Sullivan, that second track. One of my
I thought
all-time favorite
asking
cities.
What's happening right now because they just joined and started listening.
Well.
I don't know. That's how I interpreted it. Not sure.
Well, I saw it as who was playing.
Okay.
But yeah, that's Jim Sullivan's from 1969. And Marty, you will probably find this interesting. That record, like I said, was released in 1969 by a little known folk singer named Jim Sullivan. And it was the first real album where it talked blatantly about UFOs, and the title of the album is actually UFO, and all the songs are about, going out to the desert, riding down the highway and being taken up by a UFO. Interestingly enough, in 1975, Jim Sullivan left his family looking for work as a musician in Nashville from L.A., and about a day into his journey, he mysteriously disappeared, and his car was found on the side of the road with all his belongings inside. And to this day, nobody knows what happened to Jim Sullivan. We hope that he was taken by a UFO, and it's jamming with the ETs out there or something. Jamming.
Could I just quickly ask again? I know I was asking you about your motivation for, research into this topic.
Sure.
Usually people approach a subject like that because they want a certain answer. And, there's whether you want to call it bias or, anything along those lines. Did you ever go into this wanting an affirmative or wanting to know that it's not true or wanting to find out that the government is lying? I mean, was there anything like that, or were you agnostic from the outset and you were just intrigued?
I try to be agnostic, but I would be a liar if I didn't tell you that I didn't want to find something. I think that we all would love to have a close encounters of the third kind experience. And I think that goes back thousands, if not millions of years.
Yeah.
We want we're at the top of the food chain here. We want to look up into the sky and see some evidence of something above us. And I was kind of a skeptic. I didn't think I'd find anything inside these documents, and I was surprised at what I found. Like I said, I'm less of an agnostic now than I was a couple months ago.
If I had discovered these documents in the way you had, I would have been baffled, especially as an enthusiast or as someone interested in this. I would have been like, wow. Honestly, I mean, I don't know what that was like for you when you first found out about the release of these documents and, the time period in which you read them, you downloaded them, and then they disappeared. I mean, I can't imagine what that was like for you.
Well, I tell you, it's still, just as you're talking about it, go back there and I get chills. It would keep me up at night.
Yeah.
I would be thinking about this because, first of all, when you do good research, you want to start as an agnostic. You want to go through as an agnostic. You want to end as an agnostic. You want to give it some time to percolate, and then maybe look at it again.
Yeah.
So, I mean, where I first went with this is to look at it with a humorous bend. To put these incongruous facts together in some way to be able to laugh at them, because laughter is the best humor. Laughter is the best remedy humor is the best remedy. So at the end of this, I just wanted to have a good laugh because they were kind of disturbing. So then I got to go back and look at them again. I started forming ideas about not just how silly they are, but what can I do with them to help make sense of them. But still, they're remarkable documents any way you look at it.
Now, Marty, let me ask you something. Doing this show, we're very fortunate to interview some really interesting people, such as yourself. And in the past, we've gotten a chance to interview, Travis Walton and Laura Eisenhower. She was sharing with us some information that she came across growing up on Eisenhower, and she is very firm in her stance that her great grandfather, General Eisenhower, did have a meeting, I should say, with entities not from this earth. I'll say that much.
Funny you should say that.
Please feel free to go there.
Funny you should say that, because there's an enigma in one of these documents. It's I call it one of the cleaner documents. And that's the NSA monograph. It's about 10 pages long. It's in the stack. And there's a handwritten note.
Could I just ask what you mean by cleaner?
Well, the grudge documents, because it looks like a part of possibly a counterintelligence operation. I don't know that we'll ever know, but it's one explanation. The cleaner documents, like the ONI analysis, the one that you remarked on at the beginning, that was very straightforward, very common sense. Yeah, UAP is real, and we can't ignore them. That's a clean document. The grudge document, it's rife with contradictions.
Yeah.
But the NSA document is another clean document. If you look at that, there's some handwriting on that I could never figure out. I think it refers to 1952. when I believe Eisenhower was in office. And I couldn't really make it out. And the author's name has been redacted, so we don't know who was talking here. But
Marty,
it looked like something happened in Washington in 1952. Now, I'm not going to go out on a limb and say that there was a meeting between E.T. and Ike. It's an enigma inside a clean document.
Quick question. Sorry, I didn't mean to butt in there, but we have all the documents in front of us here. Can you direct us in the direction of to where we could find that, just to see?
Let me see here. Give me a second. I can find it. Number 16, Frank.
16, got it. And what is your opinion after going through all these documents? Do you believe that, at least in part, some of these sightings are of extraterrestrial craft?
I would say I would have to agree with the ONI analysis, the 48 analysis, and the NSA monograph and the RAND document that UAP is real and it shouldn't be ignored. Beyond that, anybody's guess. I think that the unfortunate thing about Bluebird and the MK Ultra is that it really kind of muddied the waters about everything. When you look at all these accounts of these extraordinary sightings involving UAP and creatures purportedly from UAP, they were made during a time when the agency was dosing God knows who with God knows what. So, I loved E.T. I loved Close Encounters. Right. I want to believe in extraterrestrial life. I haven't seen enough evidence to convince me of it. But I want to say one thing about the technological advance side of the equation.
Okay.
These reports involved crafts, quote, end quote, reaching way supersonic speeds, like, Mach 10 in the Earth's atmosphere without breaking the sound barrier. Now, the airspeed record to this date is 1976 with an SR-71. It broke, it was 2,100 miles an hour, just under Mach 3.
And that's the Blackbird, right?
That's the Blackbird, and that's the standing record. Wow. That's almost 40 years ago.
Yeah.
If we got some technology in exchange for, in this meeting, I think we got burned, because we haven't really seen anything in the way of these. The reports of these craft are really astonishing.
Right.
They can fly through the atmosphere without breaking the sound barrier. This is reportedly, right?
Yeah.
At 2,000 miles an hour and stop on a dime. I mean, that would throw a pilot through the cockpit in a conventional aircraft, and then reverse direction and go just as fast the other way or straight up. And we're nowhere near that.
Now, you're saying that as far as extraterrestrial life, and sorry to bring back to this, do you believe in extraterrestrial life?
I don't have an opinion on it. Okay. I don't disbelieve it. I don't believe it.
Okay. Yeah, still agnostic and non-biased, I guess. That's the best way to approach a research subject.
For me.
Do you have you found in these documents anything that could maybe point to the possibility that the government has covered up this any type of finding that would lead someone to believe that there is extraterrestrial life?
I want to be careful and distinguish the word cover up from an intelligence operation.
Okay.
Because an intelligence operation, by its very nature, is a cover-up. An intelligence operations aren't wrong; they're necessary. Like the sausage factory. Nobody wants to go inside the sausage factory. Everybody wants the sausage. Nobody wants the factory. So, like for example, you have the Air Force textbook that was published and then pulled 2 years later. That talked about alien physiology, not in specific terms, but in general terms.
Yeah.
And when that comes in a science textbook that is pulled from circulation, I'm not saying cover up, but I'm saying, well, if that textbook was published without knowledge of an intelligence operation or a counterintelligence operation, it's not really a cover-up.
Yeah.
Right. Now, in one of the documents, we find one titled UFO Alert. What is that about?
Oh, that was number one, I think.
That was number one, yep.
And that's the ONI analysis.
It's funny because we see the
Well, that's the first
ONI.
one we spoke
Yeah.
about, the one that was surprisingly clear and well documented. And you know what I really liked about it? It was like a science project analysis, essentially.
Yes,
And
there is one thing to say about this, and this is one of the remarkable things. There was a stack of documents that the Air Force released in 2011, grudge-related documents, including a memo that ordered the destruction of this document, which is, does two things. It verifies the document with another document. That's what you want. You want documents that refer to one another, but it also lets you know that this was a very important document because a subsequent memo ordered its destruction.
Wow.
Or all the copies were supposed to be destroyed. Obviously, somebody didn't do their job, or we wouldn't have this.
Or someone purposely went against it because they thought it was important information.
Well,
I don't know
maybe,
if
or
that's
maybe somebody
possible.
just forgot to do their job that day.
Maybe I'm just too naive thinking that someone out there actually wants people to know,
If you look at the top of the first page, it's funny. Not the slip on the first page, but I guess the second page.
Okay.
The word "top secret" is very haphazardly crossed out with a ballpoint pen, so you can still see
You can
"top
still
secret."
read it, yeah. That's quite funny. They do it in all of the documents. They just cross it out with the almost.
Well, they usually do it with a Sharpie.
Well,
it
seems
where
like
it's
they
all
crossed
blocked
it
out, but you can
yeah.
actually see the word "top secret" through this, and it's just kind of
A
it's interesting.
thin line of ink. But I liked they were talking about the three. I'm trying to find the place in the document right now, but they were talking about the three types of UAPs or UFOs, as they may have called them at the time, that were generally seen. And from what I remember, it was the disc, the cigar, and what was the third one?
Well, I don't.
I can't. There were three.
I know that there was
shapes.
they call them green fireballs.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Like fireballs, and I
spheres.
like their the possibility they were exploring that maybe we're just seeing one type of craft from different angles, and given their size, it's very possible that they were all of the same shape, but people were just seeing them from different angles, and they were taking all these possibilities into account. And I feel that they were at that point still quite unbiased. And the report was, the earlier reports were a lot rawer than the later ones, and you can tell when they start realizing the implications of this information, and they start working with that and trying to manipulate it.
One of my favorite reports in here, I think it's called the Alabama. The word Alabama is in the title. I don't know the number of it off the top of my head, but a rocket scientist sees a UAP. It's like a classic something out of Close Encounters, a formation, triangular formation. He and his wife and 3 children see this thing, and the government tries to convince him that it was it was the planet Venus or swamp gas or something, and he writes up 2.5 pages of equations proving them wrong.
Oh wow!
I think this is where you have you start to feel a little bit sorry for the people who were on this project and what they were supposed to do and what they were up against. And eventually they wrote this one off as unexplained, which isn't too many of them. That if they were forced to concede, that's where they put it. But most of the time they would just say, oh, it was swamp gas or weather balloon or psychological or something like that. But they tangled with the wrong dude on this one.
Marty, let's skip forward to number 7, which is titled FLYOBRPT procedures. What is that?
Flyover.
Flyover procedures. Yes, indeed. Let me find that one here. Hold on a second here.
All good.
Which one is that? Number 7?
Number 7.
Flyover procedure. Yes, indeed.
Now, what is in this document?
I love it. The government, on one hand, is denying flying objects, and on the other hand is writing up a procedure on how to report them.
Oh boy!
This is authored by General Hoyt Vandenberg, who was actually, I believe, the second agency director, one of the four horsemen. And at this point, it looks like, and this is 1952. At this point, it looks like the Air Force, the military, might have been on to what the agency was doing, but wasn't quite down with the whole program. You know, it wasn't. It was a one-way ticket for UAP reports. You know, they would. It was like the Roach Motel for information. It would check in. It would never check out. Right. And I think that General Vandenberg was probably getting a little concerned about, you know, information wasn't coming to him. You know, information was leaving his command. It was going to Project Grudge Knee Blue Book at Wright-Patterson, but nothing was ever coming out. And so I think he would be of the opinion, well, you know, these reports need to be filed without delay, right? Without delay, like lickety-split. Get on that. Publicity is to be avoided. But I think he was kept out of the loop on this. I mean, that was the impression I got from this.
Hearing you talk about this and how, you know, these agencies don't seem to really know what the other one is doing, to me, it kind of supports my idea that to some extent the government was designed in this manner to create these all these agencies that none of them really know what the other one is doing, and they like it that way because I guess it makes it a lot easier to go about your business and, you know, not have a whole lot of information being leaked out. Do you think that is how these agencies operate?
I think that may be true to a greater extent today than it was at this time. You know, in 1952, all the marbles were on the table. Yeah, these were war heroes. Nobody wanted to drop the ball. I think that this was a case of the military versus the agency. Okay, and the military and the agency, in my view, is like oil and water.
Yep.
Wow.
And I think that the agency had turned Grudge Knee Blue Book into an intelligence or counterintelligence operation without telling the Air Force.
Yeah, I think the problem is that nowadays, at least it seems to be the case that it's not water and oil anymore. It's oil and oil or water and water, and you know, people don't have their interests in mind anymore. They have a greater interest that is not the nation's greater interest.
Yeah, basically, it's not being a government for the people.
Yeah,
I guess it's.
I guess that's the metaphor I'm getting at. Yeah.
Well, I've seen, you know, without giving too much away, I've seen current signals that times haven't changed that much with this regard. You know, for example, the latest Senate Intelligence Subcommittee hearings last November on the agency's culpability in the detainee mistreatment, you know, at Guantanamo Bay and Abu Ghraib, for example. Right. You know, this was the agency's rules versus the military rules. Military has more rules. The agency has fewer rules. He with the fewer rules will always win.
Wow.
Always.
Wow. I saw a question in the chat that had just scrolled by, and I thought it was an interesting question. And the question, I believe, was, you know, reading all this, specifically in reference to MK Ultra, was there any mention of what were the doses of LSD that were given?
I'll tell you what.
I know that's a bit of a dangerous.
It wasn't actually that scientifically measured from what I could see, but you know, from the few cases that I know of, it was not recreational doses. Put it that way.
Wow.
The one case that comes to mind is a WMD scientist that mistook a 13th story window for a walk in the park and fell to his death.
Oh, wow.
I guess I'm not an LSD aficionado, but I would imagine it would take a lot of LSD to make a mistake like that.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like you definitely got to be past the point of, yeah. I mean, the whole MK Ultra project is really fascinating, and I mean, it's crazy. And I may be kind of splintering off a little bit, but for example, like somebody like Charles Manson, he seemed to know a bit about the power of LSD and how it could be used for mind control, and we all saw what happened after that. I mean, I think mind control just kind of conjures up all these sci-fi images in my head, but it seemed to have been a very, very real project that achieved some sort of significant results.
Well, if you look at the shopping list that the agency was looking for in these various agents, and they were looking for these compounds that would really compromise people,
right,
and get them to do things that could really embarrass them. And I could imagine an agent taking a scientist out for a weekend picnic,
right,
slipping something in their Kool-Aid, and then taking home movies. And taking the home movies, back to their report, and their report calling the scientist in and say, Herb, we need some help in your department. You don't want these home movies to affect your security clearance, do you?
right.
Honestly, I'd like to say that I did not know this aspect about their experimentation. And I mean, as it stands, feeding people, whether they're expecting it or not, feeding people these chemicals is bad enough as it stands, right?
Yeah, I'm not defending it.
Yeah, no, I realize that, and I don't know. I'm just putting out there that it's really hearing it any number of times. It's still shocking every time to know that they would do something like that and then taking these videos away. I mean,
well, I'm suggesting that. Okay, I don't really know that, but I'm trying to put myself in the position of a counterintelligence agent.
Yeah, of course,
wanting to get somebody to do something, and that'd be the perfect way to do it.
And it makes sense. I mean, you want to get the most out of it at that point, right?
Right.
And that is the way to get the most out of it.
But you also have to understand the pressure that the agency was under at the time. You have to understand where Ultra started. It was the German scientists who started the program in Germany.
Yeah.
Wow.
On Soviet spies.
Yeah, no,
so
and honestly,
I think that I'm not saying it's right because it's against the Nuremberg Accords. It's considered torture.
Yes.
I'm not defending it, but you could see how under those circumstances, agency personnel could say, "Well, what's good for the goose is good for the gander." You see, I'm not defending it.
Honestly,
I'm not saying it's right.
I want to make it clear that I'm really enjoying your non-biased, balanced point of view.
Cool.
I'm really enjoying listening to that, and I've always been a big believer in that. Don't go straight for one point, but stray in the middle.
All of these people, I believe, were heroes. They really
did something.
Did their best. Well, no matter what side you were on, whether you were Soviet or whether you were, working for the Third Reich, you really did your best. You gave your all for this cause because you believed in it, or you're trying to protect yourself or your family. I don't really see any bad people here. I really don't. I try not to. Maybe that's why I don't see bad people here. But we did get through a very dark and dangerous time. Maybe just by the skin of our teeth, but we didn't destroy the world, which we could have done.
Yeah, and we got through
it.
And
and we actually came through it, and maybe we can be the better for it.
We were talking about NICAP earlier, and in document number 10, we have something called the NICAP complaint. Can you tell me a little bit about this particular document?
This is funny because in the vacuum that was created by Grudge, which was, no reports aren't going anywhere. And also the vacuum created by Mockingbird, the press vacuum. These independent agencies sprung up, including NICAP, the National Investigative Committee on Aerial Phenomena. And this was formed by some pretty credible people, scientists, military people, former military people. As I said, this former CIA director later joined their board. And it drove law enforcement freaking crazy. Because, law enforcement was doing its best to help the agency with their program, I think.
Wow.
And that and NICAP was looking like it was, if Grudge was a counterintelligence operation, NICAP was undermining that operation. See?
Wow.
So, here we have the Air Force asking J. Edgar Hoover, what the FBI could do to silence NICAP.
Wow.
Yeah.
And basically, this was a complaint to Hoover, asking him to, do something to
take care of these people.
Yeah,
shut them down. Get them gone. Period.
Oh boy. And I know we exchanged some information prior to the show, and you made reference to Close Encounters of the Third Kind. You mentioned it in that movie, which obviously is one of my favorites, as you can imagine. There is a certain character in a French accent, right? And I remember early on in the movie, people are, somebody asked, like, who is this guy? Like, how can he be French and be working with the U.S. government?
Right.
And the information you provided me, you tell me that he was a member of this group, NICAP.
That is strongly suggested by the movie. He's not government. He's clearly not government because the military is looking at clearing that Devil's Postpile area where the mothership comes down and, Richard Dreyfuss is, all these people are, drawn to it.
Right.
And it looks to me, because they were never associated with the government. I mean, there was maybe a vague connection, but it was like the military was there and had a completely different purpose than this independent team.
Like I said, that is one of my all-time favorite movies. My dad introduced me to that film, and he loves it. And I remember, growing up, he would tell me that he felt that movie showed a lot of how UFOs and their sightings and the government involvement, it showed a pretty accurate portrayal. And the older I got, and I would look into this from time to time, you read blogs about it, and it seems that Spielberg had an extremely thorough understanding of government procedures and et cetera, in these documents that you've researched or just in your research in general. What can we take from Close Encounters of the Third Kind as being pretty much accurate to the reality of the time?
That and other movies too, Frank. I mean, I was thinking about Dr. Strangelove today.
Oh, right.
And how accurate that was to depict this Cold War period.
Kubrick,
where you have Peter Sellers playing this crazed German scientist who just can't keep his arm from, doing the Sig Heil thing.
Right.
And the gung-ho generals and Slim Pickens writing the atom bomb down. I mean, these are the character types, although exaggerated, that were actually there at the time. And it's amazing how these movie producers really nailed it. And I'm with you on Close Encounters. It was amazing how Spielberg was able to get the message long before I did.
Yeah, I mean it's a very, very interesting film. Now, as we've gone over some of these documents and you've explained to us what these are, I can't help but draw some comparison between you and Gary McKinnon. And granted, you didn't hack anything to obtain these documents, but obviously, I mean, for the people that might not be familiar with McKinnon, I believe, was from Scotland, if I'm not mistaken. McKinnon.
I don't know.
And,
that's all I have to go by.
I think he was from Scotland. He hacked into some of the military computers and government computers here in the U.S., and he claims to have found evidence that, among other things, that the U.S. has some kind of contact with extraterrestrials, and that there is an off-Earth station, if you will, in our orbit, and some very interesting allegations. And he speaks about this in a very matter-of-fact tone. I'm hard-pressed to believe that he's lying, but have you found anything in these documents that would point to some kind of secret space program or something to that extent?
I think probably the closest that I got to that was the absence of certain documents. For example, the incident at Rendlesham Forest in England or in the 1970s wasn't there. There was a very well-known UAP incident at a military base in the Rendlesham Forest in the UK in the 1970s.
Is that what they refer to as the UK's Roswell, or is this
No. Well, it might be, but I know Rendlesham is one of the words. Bentwaters is another word.
Okay,
you can find it through that. There was another incident that wasn't mentioned, and there was supposedly a craft recovered at Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. Okay. That wasn't in these. And there was another, the most famous one of them all is the Roswell, New Mexico incident. There was no report. There was publicity, but there was no report. If it was a weather balloon that crashed, I mean, technically there should have been a report.
Right.
Because there was some confusion in the media, and that, I'm thinking that should have been investigated, and there should be a report. Now, those are missing. But probably the most curious one of all is the delay of the release of the Grudge documents that were finally released in 2011. Now, there's one possible explanation for the delay of those, which ties into the German scientist management that I can think of, and that is that most of the German scientists that we got were born before 1915, because anybody after that went to the Eastern Front, right?
Oh, right.
Then if you're a baker, a scientist, didn't matter. You're going, dude, right? So, but anybody like von Braun was born in 1912,
right?
So it was an older generation. So by 2011, the Air Force could be pretty much assured that all the German scientists were dead.
Oh, wow.
Right? Which might be why the last of those documents was released. Now, there's a possibility that there are more documents to be released, and maybe what you're talking about will be discovered in other documents. But the hole in that theory is that you would see some pretty heavy redactions in the documents that are here referring to that, and I don't really see that. Right. Unless it's a higher classification. I don't really see evidence of that. I'm not saying it didn't happen or it couldn't happen, but I haven't really seen any evidence to suggest it other than what I've just told you.
Wow. And we're almost out of time, but I want to get to another document here to close, because this one's obviously really interesting and pretty close to home. If you could guide us through number 13, which is titled California Alien Encounter. What can you tell me about that?
One of my favorites. This was a guy who worked at a missile plant near Sacramento, California, called Aerojet.
Okay.
And Aerojet made parts for the Titan rockets. So Aerojet was a big part of the space program and the ICBM, missile program. And this guy it's a really amazing story. This is a guy who was deer hunting with a bow and arrow in the Sierras, and got separated from his hunting party and was forced to spend the night in the forest.
Right.
And he spotted what looked like helicopters coming after him in the evening light, but noticed that they weren't making any noise. But he just thought, well, maybe it's the wind direction or whatever. So he built 3 signal fires on the nearest ridge line to get their attention, and then he noticed that one of them dropped something, and then he heard something coming up through the brush in his direction. So he climbed up a tree. He was a little bit alarmed, didn't know it could be a bear or a lion or God knows what. And lo and behold, by this story, these 2 characters with no necks and bulging eyes and spacesuits on, and they were not from here.
Right.
were pointing at him, making cooing sounds to one another.
Oh, wow.
And he was scared to death. He said they didn't like me. I didn't like them. I started tearing off pieces of my clothing, lighting them on fire, throwing them at them to make them go away.
Mm-hmm.
And they brought in this, he said it was like a robotic machine that spewed toxic fumes at him,
oh, wow.
forced him higher into the tree, where he woke up the next morning.
Wow.
And this is one of the most bizarre stories that I could find. Probably not the most bizarre story that was there, because I obviously didn't get through all the documents in the short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a really amazing story. And the sad part about this story is that the investigators concluded that the cause of the sighting was psychological.
Oh, wow.
So you could see how that could affect this guy's security clearance.
Right, of course.
He did the right thing. He reported it, but also what's significant about this document or this report is that he didn't report it directly. He and a lot of other contractors had gotten a memo by this time that if you make reports directly, you're going to get into trouble. So he made the report through a third party, wound up in the hands of a newspaper reporter. So these investigators had to, sort of pick and find their way back to this guy, mm-hmm. because the initial reports never identified him by name. But you could just imagine how this looked on the guy's record.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let me see, because I know we got a few minutes. Why don't we do... Let's go to number 18, because this one's also another interesting one. This one's titled "The Scientific Study of Unidentified Flying Objects." Yeah. Did you find anything unusual about this particular study?
Yeah, this is a study. This is an anomaly. I've done other research projects, and documents like this turn up in other research projects. The way this document is done, it's impossible to download. It's a scientific study that was commissioned by the Air Force, mm-hmm. done by the University of Colorado. There's a link that will take you to the site, mm-hmm. but you cannot download the document. If you could even download the document, it comes up blank, completely blank.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Now, the only other documents ever come across like this were there was a RAND Corporation document on military expansion. There was another one. It was the 9/11 Commission document on, whatever happened on 9/11. Mm-hmm. Those are the only two documents I've ever run across that behave like this, that were secure documents that you couldn't append to another document or you had problems with somehow. But this was as far as the report itself, this was the so-called Condon report. Mm-hmm. And I agree with a part of this report. This was obviously a report that was slanted to a predetermined finding by the Air Force to kind of back up Project Grudge, or the whole point of Project Grudge, that, mm-hmm. hey, these things are no big deal and we shouldn't pay any attention to them. But it didn't really address whether UAP was real and that we should pay attention to them. What it said was that whatever it was wasn't a threat to our national security at this time.
Okay.
And I have to say that I agree with that statement. They're not a threat to our national security at this time. Whatever it is, hasn't shot back. Whatever it is, hasn't held any of our people for ransom and put them on YouTube in beheading videos.
Right.
I have to agree with that part of the report. On the other hand, a lot of report critics, including Alan Hynek, which is one of probably the premier researchers on UAP, came out and pointed out right away what a slanted report it was. And I could see his point, too. Looking through the report, it cherry picks reports, mixes them in with ridiculous reports, assigns the people who worked on this report, granted, were agnostics, self-proclaimed agnostics, but none of them had ever done any research on UAP. So it was, kind of, in a way, the report kind of pulled the wool over the public's eyes. Mm-hmm. In some ways, I felt, but I couldn't disagree with the findings of the report either.
That is really interesting, Marty. And unfortunately, we're running out of time. And as people probably gather by now, Marty McFly is not your real name.
It's definitely his real name.
It's as real as Project Blue Book, as he wisely put. But I mean, in closing, what would you want people to know or walk away with after this interview and discussing all these documents?
I think probably the main thing is like the NSA monograph. The conclusion of that was, keep your eyes open and watch your step, but also watch your mouth, because this is not the time period that it was 20 years ago. There are certain, I call them dog whistles, that we can avoid using and avoid bringing unwanted attention on ourselves. I would say that now that history has turned in favor of those, quote, aluminum foil cap wearers who believe in the UFOs and flying saucers and UAP. They were right. Okay, they were right. These things do exist. The government admits that now.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, using the word UFO brings unwanted attention on yourself. Same thing with using the word CIA, FBI, NSA, using the word WMD, using the word project in front of any other thing.
Right.
Will get you unwanted attention. It's the kind of thing you test it in private conversation. If it's something that makes people roll their eyes or act dismissively toward you, it's probably something that'll do the same on a telephone call or an email or a text. And so you watch your step by watching your mouth. And I'm not saying that to talk down to anybody. It's just common sense.
Of course. Marty, thank you so much for your time. Is there any way that people can get these documents, or can we, as people that tune into this show, know in the next day or two we upload the show and post it on our website? Are these documents that people can find, or do you think it's okay for us to?
You're welcome to all these documents. I feel that this is the kind of research that the more the merrier. The more people have documents like this, the better decisions that everybody can make, and we're a stronger people and a stronger country for that.
And lucky for us to have people like you in the world that are so dedicated to this and take time to go through all this and then share this information and findings with the rest of us. I really appreciate it, Marty. It's been a great show, and I know that this is only the first of many to come, because, or at least I'm extending an invitation to you to come on this show and share with everyone.
I might come back as Huckleberry Finn next time. You never know.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Marty. We really appreciate it. We're going to be in touch, and I will let you know when all this is posted on our website, so that we get your approval, and hopefully everything it's
Thanks for your good work. And by the way, keep your eyes open and watch your step.
No,
will do, Marty.
I've really appreciated your delivery.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, and have a great night.
Okay, thank you. You too.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, Genevieve. Give me some final thoughts here as we...
Oh, goodness. I'm trying to swallow my hiccups here, all day. I keep thinking I've gotten rid of my hiccups. You call them hiccups, right?
Yeah.
And I can't. Every 5 minutes they come back, and it's awful. I can't even talk. I mean, it means I've got a good excuse to let you lead the interview, but still.
Yeah. No, I mean, honestly, a really fascinating information. We will be posting these documents on our website, WoTR in the next couple of days. Check back, because obviously this is another great interview, and for the sake of keeping everything, as anonymous as possible, shout out to the person that put us in touch and allowed this show to happen. It's been great.
No, honestly, I am always very pro in terms of people who are agnostic, non-biased. They approach something neutrally, He was the epitome of that. He approached it as neutrally as you could.
Yeah.
Like, yes, this is very compelling evidence, but I will give it, I'll give it a benefit of doubt, but I'm not gonna go straight for it and believe it outright. He was a very leveled character and had a very level thinking ground.
Yeah.
And that's what I liked about him, and that's why I would be very happy to listen to his thoughts again.
Absolutely. So shout out to Marty McFly, Skyping in all the way from Hill Valley, California.
No, it was great. Thank you
It
very
really
much.
was. And we want to thank everyone that was with us tonight. If you missed any part of it, as I said, this show will be posted on our website very, very soon, along
Thank
with the
you for your
documents.
questions.
And,
I'm
yeah.
sorry some of you got to join in a bit late, but
Yeah.
hopefully you still got the
Better late
the
than
gist
never.
of it. Honestly, though, I feel this interview in particular, it was important to listen to the first half. It's not something you can jump into halfway through.
Yeah, so definitely be on the lookout. Follow us on Twitter, WOTR Radio on Twitter. Check out the website, WOTRradio.com. Like I said, we'll be posting the show on there, and we'll let everybody know. So feel free to, share with your friends and neighbors. It was another amazing show. So thank you guys for tuning in and checking it out and staying up late with us. We appreciate it, and we do it for you guys because it's a lot of fun. That being said, take care, be safe, God bless. Don't do anything too crazy. We want to see you back next week. We are going to, bid you farewell. I ran out of words. I
Good
literally
night,
did.
people. See you
Take
next
care.
week.
Bye-bye,
And
guys.
Don't forget to tune in on Thursdays.
No Added Flavors?
Thursdays, 9 o'clock. Request any song you want. If it's ridiculous,
I've gotten a few complaints that
definitely more likely to play it.
No Added Flavor podcasts are never up.
I know. I
will have people know that I remind her every week.
No.
All right. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
West of the Rockies with Frank the Engineer on the Independent FM, Los Angeles.